like me. It doesn't like me. So you know what? No more music in the background. No more headphones. You know this podcast is chasing that high. You know our motto. We say the truth over dope ass beats because it's a flight test. Don't forget to go and get your official Chronics t-shirt from the Bobby Shakes bookstore. You know what I'm saying? So the algorithm doesn't like me. The algorithm is not pushing my shit. I'm getting copyright strikes on my podcast because I am using royalty-free beats, but I'm still getting a copyright strike. And I think this is the reason why my shit is not taking off. So I guess I'm going to do this podcast without music, without a headphones, and let it rip. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Welcome to Chasing That High, 3/7/24, 11:03 p.m. Huge news in the camera world today. I didn't know about it. My man Wizard sent it in a group text. My man D. Irvin then confirmed it with a video from my best friend, Jared Polo Knows Photo. Come on, Jared. Take it easy. Come on. Let's be friends again. But anyway, I'm going to give you a little history about who I am. For those that don't know, my name is Bobby Shakes. About 25 years ago, I went into Ritz Camera and my homie James was behind the counter. I didn't know his name at the time. I walked in and I said, "What is the best camera that everybody's using right now?" And he said, "Canon." I asked him again, "What is the best camera right now on the market?" And he said Canon. I turned to my mom at the time because I was broke and I'm 50 years old and I'm still broke. And I said, "Give me the Nikon." Now, this was my transition from point and shoot cameras, the little digital cameras, to a DSLR. And my first camera was the Nikon D70. I think it was the D70. James broke down the color science for me at Ritz. This is why camera stores are very important. Because when you call B&H, they've got so many calls coming in that they can't sit with you for an hour and teach you about cameras. James sat me down and we went over the color science. He went back and he talked about Kodak versus Fuji. As we know, Kodak is blue, Fuji is gold, which makes Fuji better for our beautiful complexion. He broke it down to me that Canon is red, Nikon is blue. I told him I'm going to be shooting in nightclubs. Just by understanding color science, I knew that I needed a blue camera. So by an accident, I picked a camera with a blue color science. And on top of that, Nikon just work better in the nightclub. I'm a nightclub photographer. I do a lot of low light stuff. So the camera that performs better in the light is a better camera for me. So I bought my Nikon. And I loved it ever since. A lot of photographers say they're photographers. I'm not throwing shade on anybody, but I actually do every single week the minimum 2,000 frames, the maximum 10,000 frames. That is how much I shoot a week. And I've been doing that since how long? First it was the Canon point and shoots, then I went to DSLR. I've burnt out the shutter on two D70s, two D200s, two D300s. I haven't burnt out the shutter on my D800, and my D850 is battle tested. Looking back at my work, I was fucking terrible. But because I had the website and what I was doing with my culture, people loved it. The D850, I don't care what anybody says. The D850 is the best camera on the market today. It's the best camera on the market for photographers, not for hybrids. Now, I know a lot of you guys are now hybrids, so I would go Canon or I would go Sony. But for a true guy that just shoots pictures, bangs the shutter, and be out, the D850 is the best camera on the market. You could use it in the studio. You could use it for sports. You could use it low light. You could record a couple of video clips. It's amazing. Another reason why I chose to go with Nikon is because Nikon at the time was the only camera company that made their own glass. That's important to me. Canon at the time did not make their own glass. Nikon made their own glass. Now Canon has the RF series, which by far is the best glass on the planet. The best glass on the planet is Canon. I hate saying that. I'm a Nikon fanboy. Nikon fanboy. I'm a Nikon fanboy. Another thing I loved about the Nikon was at the time it was the only camera that had a decent fisheye lens. Canon had a fisheye lens, but it didn't have that distortion that I loved. And I would say proudly that I was the first person to use a fisheye lens in the nightclub. The reason why is because I transitioned from skateboarding to club photography. And the only way you could shoot a nightclub is in the fisheye lens. Because you catch everything. You could be on stage, you could take a picture of the artist, you could get a picture of the crowd, all 180 degrees, and the pictures look crazy. And the titties pop out of the screen, the booties pop out of the screen. Private parts look crazy because everything is just exaggerated and they just look so juicy. So that's why we shoot fisheye. That's why this podcast is done on a fisheye. Because the fisheye has been my primary lens for 25 years. So here we are now, chasing that high. You know, we talk about stocks, we talk about real estate, we talk about acquisitions. This right here, this acquisition should be huge for me. It should be huge. I'm going to give you a little history. Red cameras were the first guys that invented an uncompressed Kodak. That means you could record uncompressed data internally on the camera. Most cameras, you got to add an external hard drive or this or that. So Red for years had the patent on this type of Kodak. And what's good about video uncompressed, it's like taking a picture raw. You could take that photo into Lightroom or Adobe and do whatever the hell you want with it. The same with video footage. And we all know it's very, very hard to detail video footage like it is a photography. So this was big. This was totally big. Totally big to have uncompressed video. So you could, if you shot something too dark, you could boost it without losing information, and vice versa. And on top of that, Red gave you those high frame rates, which was amazing. There was no other camera that could give you uncompressed data plus massive frame rates, 240 frames a second, 100 frames a second, 60 frames a second. Back then, everybody was just squeaking to 60. But we all know we shot 24 for motion blur, right? You shoot 24 frames a second, you get that beautiful motion blur. It looks cinematic. But Red was giving you these high-speed cameras, uncompressed, large files. It was the best. The problem with Red is it's just an unstable piece of software. Red is very unstable. It overheats. It takes too long to black. Like Red is not a camera where I could be in the dance hall and be like, oh shit, this girl's about to jump out of a tree. Because in dance hall, that's what we do. We jump out of fucking trees. Or you're at a party and shit, and the fight's about to break out. Like you can't just pull out your camera, turn it on, hit the record, and get the action. That was the problem with Red. That's why a lot of us went to Sony and Canon, because you could just hit the record button, turn it on, hit the record button, and you're ready to go. Red is a type of camera that needs a crew. And Red is horrible low light. It needs to be lit. You need to throw light on that sensor. Beside these few little quirks, Red is a big camera. Not too really here in Massachusetts. This is more of an RE Sony neighborhood, where if you go out to LA, every kid and their mother's shooting on Red. So Boston, New Hampshire, where I'm at right now is very RE centric. This is RE's domain. New York, Massachusetts. If you're an RE operator, you can make a lot of money doing commercial work out here in Boston. Out in LA, it's completely different because we're more corporate and commercial work. Where out there is more film and grading, right? We grade out here in Massachusetts, but we don't go extensive grading. I mean, you're shooting a Dunkin' Donut commercial. I mean, come on. No shade to Dunkin' Donut. I mean, we love Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts is actually our sponsor for today's video. Not really, but I don't want Dunkin' Donuts to sue me. So that's the difference between Massachusetts and New York and LA. LA needs, you got to grade, right? You're shooting certain scenes, you're shooting Batman. You just want that. You want to be able to bring your raw footage into your editing software and just pop that purple and that green on the Joker and those red lips. You just want to make those lips juicy, right? Pause. You just want to make those colors really pop. we're out here in Massachusetts where there's a lot of commercial work. We do a lot of filming here. But majority of guys like us are going to get gigs that are more corporate. What's good about being a red operator is if they're shooting a scene, a green screen out in LA, and you have a red camera, then they could incorporate that red behind the scenes footage with the actual film footage to do deleted scenes, or when they're doing interviews, or when they're promoting the film, they can show you behind the scenes work, and the footage would be the same because they can grade it the same. That's where red really comes into play. Red really comes into play when you're doing background work, behind the scenes work, right? Where you're following the Joker, getting the makeup put on, and he's doing his little jokes and all of that stuff, and you're filming all of that content. That content can be used on deleted scenes on the DVD, because now we have the same camera being used. So if you're shooting on the monster, if you're doing 8K, your film is in 8K, and you have somebody shooting the Komodo, those footages are comparable. Also, too, when you're shooting 8K and you want to put the little Komodo inside of a car to crash a car, that's perfect. You're crashing a $6,000 camera instead of crashing an Arri or a Sony, right? So now we could do in the car footage, because before we'd probably use like GoPro stuff. Now you can put a 6K camera inside the car and get the explosion or the collision inside the car, bring it into post, and with your 6K and 8K, you with the uncompressed, you could grade it almost flawless, and the average person wouldn't know that one's 8K, one's 6K. And that was perfect for red guys. I know a lot of guys had made a ton of money. They went out to Hollywood. They couldn't get a DP job, but they did a lot of shooting behind the scenes. And you could make a good living doing that. Commercials, tons of shit. One of the other great things about red was it made shooting green screen flawless, because it's uncompressed and you're shooting at such a high frame rate. And you got so much information. You got an 8K file uncompressed. That's ginormous. Another problem with red was that it was proprietary, right? You had to use their memory cards. You had to use their setup, and their memory cards were really expensive. Really expensive. So those are the pros and cons of red cameras. Now let's go to Nikon. Like I said, I'm a fanboy. Nikon was late to the party. Late to the party. When the Canon 5D came out, that was game changer. Game changer. You had a cinematic camera and a photography camera all in one. And the 5D was the standard for small guys. And then Sony, which I love and I hate. I think Sony is the guy with all the money that bullies people. I have a personal beef with Sony, even though this is being shot on a Sony. I have a personal beef with Sony that dates back to the PlayStation, where Nintendo and Sony were to merge. Sony was going to create the discs that will go underneath the Super Nintendo, and Nintendo backed out and said, you know what, we're going to go with cartridge. Sony had all this R&D for a video game system, and then they said, fuck it, we're going to make the PlayStation. And that, up until this day, still fucking bothers me. Even though I love PlayStation and I worked for them on the Move campaign, I love PlayStation. I still feel a way about you guys. I almost said motherfuckers. I almost said motherfuckers. So having this hate for Sony. Then a couple years back, Sony made a claim that they're going to be the #1 camera in digital photography. That was Sony's goal. And looking back at it, they fucking did it. They fucking did it. They have great cinematography cameras, right? You could get the FX3 for like $4,000, which is going to give you 10-bit, which is crazy. The camera that I'm shooting on, what is this? The Alpha A7S Mark II. At the time, you could do 120 at 1080p. I think this camera's like 6 years old. It's mind blowing. So Canon already had the footprint on cinematography because they had the 5D. Now you could get that shallow depth of field, and then you could take photos. And then Sony came in and battled Canon, while Nikon was still on the fucking D300. Then they came out with the D800, which gave great video. I love the video that comes out of the D800. I absolutely love it. It just has a fuzz to it. It looks like film. I love it. The picture below, well, not this picture below, but when we do the short of this, of me running my fucking mouth, you'll see the photo shot on a D800 with the Zeiss 51.4. So that is Nikon. That is Red. Nikon then released the Z series. To me, I'm a Nikon fanboy. The Z series cameras are absolute trash. The 6, the 7, the 8, and the 9. In my personal and humble opinion, I think those cameras are absolute trash. I got into a huge fight on YouTube. And everybody's like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. When the Z8 was announced, I said on every forum, it's going to be a failed camera. And Nikon is not going to be able to get into the top 2 race. It's Canon and Sony. Canon, Sony, Sony, Canon, Canon, Sony, Sony, Canon. And I'm right. The 2 top selling cameras is either Canon or Sony and Canon. And I think Nikon has just jumped Fuji to 3rd place. The camera is selling well because all the Nikon fanboys want to go mirrorless. Well, those mirrorless cameras are only good for people that want to shoot fucking birds. The Z series has it can't catch focus in low light. It just can't. And what I'm hearing is that it's not a good studio camera either. I'm not a bird photographer. I have no desire to sit in a tree, fart, and take pictures of fucking penguins. That's just not my fucking thing. It's just not. I'm sorry. It's not my fucking thing. It's just not. So I'm still with the D850, and I refuse to go Z series until they actually put out a fucking camera that will work. They need to replace the D850. Sony needs to replace the D850. Canon needs to replace the D850. Fuji needs to replace the D850. Every camera company, this is the emerald tablet of the fucking pyramid. The D850 was created by aliens. By fucking aliens. And I know it was created by aliens because NASA uses Nikon cameras to take pictures of the world in space. And I think an astronaut lost the D4 years ago. So there's like a D4 floating in space. And there's some aliens zipping around in space. And they saw like this crazy thing floating around. And they grabbed it, took it back to their lab, and dropped the D850 in Japan. I truly believe it. I believe it. I think that's how it was done. Because that camera is amazing. How could you come out with a 45 megapixel camera? This is my beef with Nikon. How could you come out with a 45 megapixel camera when you could edit 100 megapixel stuff on iPads now? Like, this is no longer in the day where computer power is a problem. I mean, I'm using a 380 graphics card on a podcast. Like, technology has gone leaps and bounds. People now have 490 graphics cards. The Apple chips, the M2, the M3, big, fat, and skinny, whatever they're called, they're amazing. So you don't need those big computers anymore to compile information. So I was hoping that the Z7 or the Z8 would come 60 megapixels or 70 megapixels, because you can never have enough information. And when you come out with 60 megapixels, you're going to hold on to those guys and not going to jump to Fuji at 100 megapixels. Because then you're like a quasi-medium format on a smaller sensor. And Nikon has great Kodak. I just don't understand how Nikon came out with a 45 megapixel camera just like the D850. I mean, that blows my fucking mind. But then again, there's a lot of guys that don't. I'm a megapixel guy because all my pictures that I drop is full res. And all the real estate agents and everybody that I work with can't stand me, because to upload one exterior photo, it takes them 5 hours. Well, is that my fucking problem that you got fucking dial-up internet? It's not my problem. Spend the fucking money, you cheap fuck, and get higher internet. So I'm a megapixel guy. Now let's go to this acquisition. Nikon and Red. Everybody's going crazy over it besides me. And I'm not just doing this just to be a hater. I don't see how this acquisition makes any fucking sense at all. This is going to have to, Red is going to have to completely rebuild their systems, and Nikon's going to have to completely rebuild their system. Because Red is an unstable camera and it overheats. Everybody I know that shoots Red, you have to rent two on a set, because one's going to overheat and then that's it. Has a lot of blackouts. It's an inferior project to Ari or Sony. And then Nikon with their mirrorless system, which is nowhere near that of Sony or Canon. Red's autofocus is trash. Sorry for burping on it's complete trash. Nikon's autofocusing in their on their Z series is absolute trash. They just didn't update, because guys that take pictures of penguins are taking pictures of penguins, but the only thing that's coming intact is the penguin's nuts. It's crazy what's going on. So my question is to everybody that's going absolutely insane over this acquisition: what is going to happen? Red and Nikon need to fix their autofocus problem. The Z series that just came out doesn't have better focusing than my Sony A7S Mark II. It may not look like it. I mean, this video might be blurry as fuck because I'm shooting manual. Is it focused? Let me see here. I don't know. I don't know if it's focused or not. Is it focused? Chat? Is it focused? Let me see who's in the chat. Is anybody talking to me? Or is it another night me talking by myself? Oh, look, nobody's in the chat. Just another night of me talking to my fucking self. We got 7 people on the Twitters. Excuse me, Elon Musk, the X's. So I don't understand. I don't see Canon or Sony or Fuji or Blackmagic or Ari worrying about this acquisition. This is not an acquisition that's that everybody in the film industry is going to be crying. Like, oh my God, where's my crying big baby? I don't see that. I don't see how this acquisition and merger is going to frighten the film industry. Because Sony has their rigs that you record onto an external hard drive. Ari is Ari or Erie, whatever it is the staple, is the pinnacle of film. The pinnacle. C300, C200, C100. Amazing piece of work. The Blackmagic, which the GOAT uses, my homie. Not really a fan of Blackmagic. I love DaVinci. I love the color grading DaVinci. I think color grading DaVinci is the way to go. I don't think color grading in Premiere or Final Cut cuts it. No pun intended. But I don't see how this acquisition is gonna be good. I just don't see it. What, we're gonna get an uncompressed Nikon camera? We already have that. It's called the Z9. But the autofocus is trash. The autofocus on Red is trash. To me, I think this would have been a scary acquisition if Sony had bought Red. Because Sony by far is the king of cinema. It's not the standard like Ari, but it's a lot of stuff is shot on their cinema line. A lot of movies is shot. I mean, they own their own studio. They make their own cameras. I don't think you can't get any better synergy than that. And they make their own music. They make their own cameras. They make their own music. They have their own film division. I don't know how this is going to frighten Sony. I don't know how this is going to frighten Canon. I don't think it will. Because Canon is leaps and bounds. When it comes to glass, the RF glass is the best in the business. Nikon doesn't have cine lenses. So now what are they going to do? Are they going to acquire Zeiss? Which would probably be, if I was Nikon, that's what I would do. I would acquire Zeiss with the Nikon mount only, and then build Red up from there. So then that would force people to go to the Red system, because Zeiss lenses are the best. Zeiss lenses are the best to me. I just think they have a color, they have an accuracy, they have a good bokeh. absolutely love Zeiss glass. That's the only thing I shoot with. It's like painting. When I put my 51.4 onto my D800 and shoot, it's like cream, man. It's like cream. So I don't know what these two companies are going to do. It's the blind leading the blind. Red needs to make better cameras and fix their autofocus system. Nikon needs to make better cameras and fix their autofocus system. I mean, that's crazy to me. It's like two people hooked on heroin getting married. And I was like, oh man, this is great. Who's going to force who to get off the drunk? And I think that's the same exact thing with these two companies. I'm mind blown. I'm mind blown how everybody's so excited. I'm just mind blown by that. I just don't see it happening. Now, I said if I was not going to acquire Zeiss, which would be a good move, because when you're shooting film stuff, you usually do manual focus, right? Bring out the tape measure and you go, oh, that nose is 8 feet from the camera. And unless you guys, I know a lot of you kids don't know that, but there's numbers on the camera, feet, go to 8 feet and it's in focus. And then if the gun is 4 feet away from the camera, you could go 4, 8, 8 to 4. And that's how you do your rack focusing. That's how you get those breathing effects. So I really don't know what these two people are going to do. And to me, it's the blind leading the fucking blind. So for Nikon and Red to get up to speed with everybody else to catch up, they would have to acquire a lens company. They would have to acquire Zeiss. Because you have to compete with the RF shit. The RF stuff is bulletproof. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know where these two companies are going. It's great because now Nikon can sell the uncompressed licensing to everybody. Is it just that? You know, it could be that, right? It's kind of like when Apple bought Beats, right? They could care too less about the fucking headphones. It was the software. It was the software that Beats had that Apple needed to incorporate into their iTunes and Apple Music. So sometimes, right? And when we talk money, sometimes the acquisition is for something that you have. We're not making any money. Our cameras suck. How can we compete with everybody else? We're going to acquire Red, then force everybody to buy the uncompressed licensing from us. And that's a moneymaker. And then maybe they could take that R&D and start to build glass and a better photography camera. But I will say this in closing. And to tell the truth, me talking without any music in the background, the algorithm has pushed this podcast out to more fucking people. So maybe that's the reason why Noah was watching me, was because of the music I was playing. I mean, I wasn't stealing music from Sony. It was royalty-free music, but it looks like the algorithm didn't like the music in the background because I guess they can't monetize music in the background. Just, I don't know. But it worked. It fucking worked. Maybe I could pay off some of my fucking parking tickets. Well, that's it for me. I'm really confused about these two companies working together. I think it's the blind leading the blind. I don't know where they're gonna go. Again, I'm confused. I don't know if Nikon's gonna acquire a cine lens company. Um, I don't know if Red's gonna be able to make a stable camera. I don't think Nikon makes a stable mirrorless camera. I just don't understand. I just don't understand. Maybe the reason they had to acquire Red was because of the lawsuit that Nikon won fighting over the uncompressed licensings or patent. Maybe Red probably gave up to Nikon and said, just eat us up. So that's probably why they did the acquisition. I really don't know. But as a Nikon fanboy, this is going to be a pretty good story to watch to see what these guys are doing. I don't know. I have no idea. But I'm probably the only Nikon person that's very skeptical of this merger. Thank you so much for coming to Chasing That High. 3724, filmed at 11 o'clock, done filming at 11:43 p.m. Love you guys, and yes, finally people watched the fucking episode. Thank you so much. Love you guys.